get started. Are there any questions on the homework assignments? Number 18 from last night or the night before? Last night. So number 18. Distribute through. So we do negative 4x to the fifth times 11x cubed. Well, negative 4 times 11 is negative 44. X to the fifth times x to the third would be x to the eighth. When the bases are the same, we add the exponent. So x to the fifth times x to the third would be x to the eighth. Negative 4x to the fifth times 2x squared. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. X to the fifth times x squared would be x to the seventh. Negative 4x to the fifth times x 9x would be negative 36x to the sixth. And negative 4x to the fifth times 1 is negative 4x to the fifth. Times 1.
Is that the 9x?
Negative 4 times 9. X to the fifth times x. Is the exponents understood to be 1.
So you're adding exponents on 1.
Mm-hmm.
I put 15 on that one. For negative 44x.
Because when we have like bases, we add the exponents. Any other questions on the homework? We'll look at 21. 20 and 21, we're using the distributive property, multiplying through. So we'll do x squared times x is x to the fourth. X squared times negative 3x is negative 3x cubed. And x squared times negative 5 is negative 5x squared. We do the same thing with negative 2x. Negative 2x times x squared is negative 2x cubed. Negative 2x times negative 3x will be plus 6x squared. And negative 2x times negative 5 is plus 10x. And lastly, we multiply through by negative 4. Negative 4 times x squared is, well, negative 4x squared. Negative 4 times negative 3x is plus 12x. And negative 4 times negative 5 would be plus 20. I just ran out of room. Now at this point here, we would combine like terms. X to the fourth does not have any like terms, so it's just x to the fourth. Our cubic terms, negative 3x cubed minus 2x cubed. Negative 3 minus 2 is negative 5x cubed. X squared terms, negative 5x squared plus 6x squared is positive x squared minus 4x squared, because negative 5 plus 6 is 1. 1 minus 4 is negative 3. So we have negative 3x squared. 10x plus 12x is plus 22x. And then we have plus that's it. 20 will be the same thing. It's just instead of having, we'll have 3 less terms. Huh? The coefficients or the exponents? Questions on this here? So these were from yesterday. Yesterday we did addition, subtraction, and multiplication. The only operation we didn't do was division. And that's what we're going to be doing today. And there's 2 ways we can divide polynomial functions. One of them is by long division. And the other is synthetic division. Now, normally I would go over how to do, we would go back over doing long division with numbers, but I think it's going to be easier if we just jump right into this. When you divide a polynomial f of x by a non-zero polynomial divisor d of x, you get a quotient and a remainder. Now, when we divide 2 polynomial expressions, first thing we're going to do is we'll set the problem up. So we will have our division symbol for long division. We have this here. I think it's sometimes been referred to as a house, inside, outside, but we have this here. The x plus 1 will go on the outside, and our x cubed minus x squared plus 2x plus 8 will go inside. Now, some of the steps of long division are similar with polynomials as they are numbers. This are real numbers dividing 2 real numbers, but there are some differences. Now, the first thing we do in dividing polynomial functions is we want to get the first term inside the symbol to become 0. We want to cancel it out 1 term at a time, and we always want to cancel the leftmost term out. Now, to do that, we need to see what is going to multiply by x to give us x cubed. What times x is x cubed? So we have 3 of them, yes? How many do we have? How many more do we need? 2 to get to 3, yes? So 2x's we would write as x squared. X squared times x would indeed give us x to the 3rd, yes? Okay, so that's first step, is figuring out what we need to multiply by the leftmost term over here to give us the leftmost term over here. Next step, multiply it. So off to the side, we're going to do x squared times x plus 1. X squared times x is x cubed, which is what we wanted. X squared times 1 is plus 1x squared, plus our x squared. We're going to take these terms and place them underneath. X cubed plus x squared. Questions on this so far? Next step is to subtract, minus. X cubed minus x cubed is 0, because that's what we wanted. We wanted that first set of terms to cancel out. We wanted that x cubed term to become 0. Now we'll look at the next one. Negative x squared minus x squared is negative 2x squared. Because negative 1 minus 1 is negative 2, so we have negative 2x squared. Are you ready for the next step? Next step. is to bring x term down. So we bring down the plus 2x. What do we think of this so far?
The way you're explaining it seems simple, but I know it's not.
The next step is we repeat what we just did. So we need to see what times x will give us negative 2x squared. So we will need a negative 2, yes? Because the negative 2 will turn the 1 in front of the x into negative 2, yes? What do we need to multiply x by to get x squared? So what times x is x, x. So we need n x. So what we needed to multiply x by to get negative 2x squared? Negative 2x. Okay. Our next step is to multiply it. Negative 2x times our x plus 1. Negative 2x times x is negative 2x squared. Negative 2x times 1 is negative 2x. Because we need it to multiply with x to give us our negative 2x squared. So that those will cancel out. Because the x squared on top was used for our first step. And then again, we're going to subtract. Negative 2x squared minus negative 2x squared. Negative 2 minus negative 2. Negative 2 minus negative 2 is 0. Negative 2x squared minus 2x squared is 0. 2x minus negative 2x.
Wait, did you not take the plus 8 down too? Whenever you took the 2x?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet.
Good. 4x. We only bring it one term at a time. Yes. Then we bring down the plus 8. Because what we're dividing has two terms. So in each of these steps, we're really just going to be looking 2 terms at a time. If we had a third term here, then we would want to look at it 3 terms at a time. Question on this so far? We ready for the next step? Well, we're just going to repeat what we just did again. We need to see what times x will give us 4x. 4. And it would be plus 4 because we need it to be positive 4. And then again, we're going to take our 4 and multiply it by our x plus 1. Our 4 times x would be 4x which is what we wanted. 4 times 1 is plus 4. And then we will subtract. 4x minus 4x is 8 minus 4 is 4. Do we have another term to bring down? That's it. With numbers, we could keep adding zeros after the decimal point to make it work. But here, we can't just add terms to it. So we are finished doing the division. Now we do need to add the remainder back to our answer if we have a remainder other than 0. We put it back in. So we do put the 4, the remainder, on top of this fraction. And what have we been dividing everything by? X plus 1. So we put the 4 over x plus 1. And that's our answer. Questions on this here? I think most of y'all agree with the fact that there are a lot of steps and not a lot of steps all at the same time.
I was like, forget, but
Unfortunately, the calculator needs a value for x. And our answer doesn't give us a straight number. We actually have variables left over. Now, if there is a remainder, it means that it doesn't multiply nicely back together, but it can. If we wanted to multiply these two back together, we would get back to our starting position. Well, didn't mean to run through that. Because if I wanted to multiply this by x plus 1, we would actually get back to x cubed minus x squared plus 2x plus 8. Because, well, x times x squared would be our x cubed. X times negative 2x would be negative 2x squared. X times 4 would be plus 4x. I'm going to worry about that second half in a second. Our 1 times x squared would be plus x squared. Our 1 times negative 2x would be negative 2x. And our 1 times 4 would be plus 4. Yes? Now, the reason I didn't multiply with the x 4 over x plus 1 is because I'm multiplying the whole thing by what? X plus 1, yes? And if we do that with this fraction here, well, that in the denominator would cancel because we're multiplying both terms by it. I mean, if we did it out, x times 4x plus 1, it'd be 4x over x plus 1. And then we'd also have x4 over x plus 1. Same denominators, they would add together. 4 over x plus 1. The rest of this, we would have x cubed, negative 2x squared, minus, or plus x squared would be negative x squared. 4x minus 2x is 4x. Minus 2x would be positive 2x. So we do have the x cubed, we have the x squared, we have the 2x. But we have our plus 4, yes? This last part over here ends up simplifying to 4 because we can factor the 4 out, giving us x plus 1 over x plus 1, which is 4. And our 4 plus 4 here would give us 8. But that's beside the point. I did that there just so that y'all could see that we can multiply that back out and get back to where we start, but it's not necessary for these here. Okay. Let's look at the next one. X squared plus 3x plus 2 is on the outside, yes? Inside would be 2x to the 4th. 3x cubed plus, we're missing something. Yeah, there is another tad bit we do have to add. Funny enough, it really doesn't add anything to it, but we do need it. Because our first term inside is x to the 4th, yes? Our next one's x cubed, yes? Or x squared. So we need 0x squared. If there is a term missing, we have to add it back in. I mean, we do have to add it in, but it's adding nothing to it. But we do need it. If there's any spots missing, we have to add it back in.
Wait, which number is it?
This is, I think it's A on the note sheet. Now, that works with outside the or outside our division symbol or inside. Now, for the one outside, I don't have to add a 0x cubed because the biggest one we have is x squared. Since x squared is the biggest one, we need the x squared x constant. Inside, since x to the fourth was the biggest term, we need x to the fourth, x cubed, x squared, x, and constant. Questions on this here? Our first step, what times x squared will give us 2x to the fourth? 2x squared. Now, I'm going to show you this here. This is kind of nice. So x squared, 3x2, we do have all the terms there, yes? How many terms do I have there? 3, yes? X to the fourth is our first term here. Well, that's 1, 2, 3. Our third term is what? X squared, yes? So the variable that we're going to have to start with is going to be x squared, which means the next one after it is going to be, and then a constant. Kind of tells us which variables we'll have, yes? Let's look back at the first one. Well, apparently I got rid of it. I can write all that back in or go backwards. Backtracking. Here we go. If I look at this here, how many terms do we have? 2. If I go over 2, we are at the second one, the x squared term. What did we start with? X squared. Yes? It'll always repeat like that if we have the terms. It will go in that way there. Okay. That's just the first problem again, isn't it? Oh, yeah. Let's see here. Oh, I know what all that is. That's last hour. Oh. Yeah. Well, what I mean by that is that if you press Control Y on the calculator or on the keyboard, it's the shortcut for edit redo, not edit undo. So it was redoing all the previous steps that had been done. So all the stuff I was doing previously in 6 hour, it was redoing those. All right. Any questions on how we found the first term we're multiplying through? So we're going to multiply through by 2x squared. So we're going to multiply it by our x squared plus 3x plus 2. We're going to distribute through. 2x squared times x squared is 2x to the fourth. 2x squared times 3x, 2 times 3 would be positive 6. X squared times x is x to the third. And 2x squared times 2 is plus 4x squared. And again, just like the last problem, we're going to subtract. 2x to the fourth minus 2x to the fourth is 0. 3x cubed minus 6x cubed is negative 3x cubed. 0x squared minus 4x squared, negative 4x squared. Then our next step is to bring down the plus 5x. Now the last one we asked about the plus 8, why we didn't bring it down at that first step, because we only had 2 terms, so we're going to focus on 2. Here we have 3, and at this next step we actually have 3 terms down there, so it still works out. Now we're going to repeat this process again. What times x squared gives us negative 3x cubed? Negative 3x. Because the variables will match up with what they're sitting above. X squared, x, in our next term. So we're going to multiply our x squared plus 3x plus 2 by negative 3x. So when we distribute this here, negative 3x times x squared is negative 3x cubed, which is what we wanted. Negative 3x times 3x. Negative 3 times 3 is 9. X times x is x squared. And negative 3x times 2 is negative 6x. And at this point here, we will subtract. Negative 3x cubed minus negative 3x cubed is 0. Negative 4x squared minus negative 9x squared. Well, the negative and negative would make a plus. So negative 4 plus 9 is 5x squared. 5x minus negative 6x. The negative and negative would make a plus. 5x plus 6x is 11x. And then we bring down the negative 1. Lastly, what times x squared gives us 5x squared? It'd be positive 5. What would the remainder be? Let's see. So if we do 5 times our x squared plus 3x plus 2, distribute it through. 5 times x squared is 5x squared. 5 times 3x is plus 15x, and 5 times 2 is plus 10. 5x squared plus 15x plus 10. At this point, we are going to subtract. And 5x squared minus 5x squared is again 0. It cancels out. 11x minus 15x. Negative 4x. And negative 1 minus 10 is negative 11. Yeah. So we have to add back our negative 4x minus 11 x squared plus 2. They will all have a remainder. The remainder might be 0, but they all will have a remainder. If the remainder is 0, we don't have to write any of that. It would just be this part here. We are not. We are going to finish this problem here. This will be the last one we do. We will finish the note sheet tomorrow. I believe the two of y'all.
Oh no, I'm just going to the next
Okay. So, last one we're doing today is this one here. Outside, our radical is going to be our x squared minus 3x minus 2. Inside, our first term is 4x to the fourth plus what? Zero x squared. Because we have 4x to the fourth, but we don't have an x cubed or x squared term, so we have to add them in as zeros. But we do have an x term, so it'd be plus 5x minus 4. Because if we have any terms missing, we have to add them back in with a 0 in front. Have a good one. Now, there's different ways we can look at it. Here, we have how many terms? 3, yes? So we can go over 3. 1, 2, 3. And our third term is our x squared term, yes? So on top, the variable we will need is our x squared, because x squared times x squared is indeed x to the fourth, yes? So now we just need to see what number in front of our x squared, but we need to multiply it to get 4. What's the number in front of x squared? What times 1 is 4? So what we need to multiply this first one by is 4x squared. So to start this off, we're going to be multiplying 4x squared by our x squared minus 3x minus 2. Well, our 4x squared times x squared is 4x to the fourth. 4x squared times negative 3x is negative 12x cubed. And 4x squared times negative 2 is negative 8x squared. And then we will subtract. Questions on this here? 4x to the fourth minus 4x to the fourth is 0. 0x cubed minus negative 12x cubed. Negative and negative make a plus 12x cubed. 0x squared minus negative 8x squared. 0 minus negative 8 plus 8x squared. Now, we can type some parts of this into the calculator, not the whole thing. We can type the coefficients, our numbers. So for the last one, 0 minus negative 8. In the calculator, I can say 0 minus negative 8. Give us 8, so it's plus 8. So we can type parts of it in, just not everything. And then we'll bring down the plus 5x. And we repeat this process again. But we do know that the next term should have an x. And we need to see what times are 1x squared to give us positive 12x squared. That's going to be plus 12x. Questions on this here? Now we're going to multiply through by 12x. So we'll distribute the 12x. 12x times x squared is 12x cubed like we wanted. 12x squared times negative 3x. 12 times 3, negative 3 is negative 36. X times x is x squared. And 12x times negative 2, 12 times negative 2 is negative 24. And we still have x. And again, our next step is going to be to subtract. 12x cubed minus 12x cubed is 0. 8x squared minus negative 36x squared. The negative and negative would make a positive. And 8 plus 36 is 4. And we have our x squared. 5x minus negative 24x. Negative and negative make a plus. 5 plus 24 is x. And last but not least, we bring down the last term, our negative 4. And we do this process one more time. What times x squared is 44x squared?
44.
Which means we have to multiply our polynomial by 44. If we do this here, we get 44 times x squared is 44x squared. 44 times negative 3x is negative 132x. And 44 times negative 2 is negative 88. And we can put this underneath this here. So we have 44x squared minus 132x minus 88. Last thing we need to do is to subtract. 44x squared minus 44x squared is 0. 29x minus negative 132x. Negative, negative make plus, giving us 161x. Negative 4 minus negative 88.
84.
Negative, negative make a plus, giving us positive 84. And since it's not 0, we do have to add it back in. Giving us this here. I have a feeling doing a few more of these would probably be helpful. Yes. So we'll do a few more of these tomorrow, and then the rest of the time we will spend on homework.